Being positive is one of those things that sounds incredibly simple. Just think positive thoughts. Look on the bright side. Stop worrying. Everything will eventually work itself out. But when something is genuinely going wrong, that advice isn't particularly helpful. You cannot simply tell yourself that everything is amazing when clearly it's not. And pretending that your problems do not exist is not positivity. That is avoidance. Real positivity is being able to acknowledge that sometimes it's difficult without immediately deciding everything is ruined. It is the difference between saying this has gone badly and saying everything always goes badly for me. Those two statements might sound similar, but they lead you in completely different directions. One describes what happened, the other turns what happened into your identity. And I think that is where becoming more positive actually starts. It's not about forcing yourself to feel happy all the time. It's about becoming more careful with the story you attach to what happens. There is genuinely some interesting research behind this as well. One long-term study followed nearly 70,000 women and more than 1,400 men. The researchers found that people with higher levels of optimism tended to live longer and were more likely to reach the age of 85. They estimated that higher optimism was associated with 11 to 15% longer lifespan. Now that does not prove that thinking positively will automatically make you live longer. More optimistic people may also exercise more, eat better, smoke less, or respond to stress differently. But it does suggest that the way we think about the future may influence how we behave in the present. If you believe that your actions can improve your future, you are probably more likely to take those actions. If you believe that nothing will ever improve, doing anything can start to feel a bit pointless. And that becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. Most situations are not completely good or completely bad. The problem is that our brains are very good at taking one difficult event and using it to predict the rest of our lives. You do not get the job you wanted, so you decide you will never find a good job. One investment fails, so you decide that you are terrible with money. A relationship ends, so you decide that nobody will ever want you. A project fails, so you decide that you are not capable of succeeding. Something happens once and your brain presents it as evidence of a permanent pattern. The first practical way to become more positive is therefore to separate what actually happened from what you are predicting will happen next. Ask yourself one simple question. What do I know for certain? You might know that something did not work today. You normally do not know that nothing will ever work. You might know that you made a mistake. You do not know that you are incapable of improving. You might know that you are having a bad week. You do not know that the rest of the year will be bad. That small distinction can stop one difficult moment from taking over everything else. The second thing is to pay attention to what you repeatedly consume. If you spend hours every day watching people argue, reading negative news, and comparing yourself with the most successful people on the internet, you are probably going to feel more negative. That is not necessarily because you lack discipline. It's because you are constantly feeding your brain reasons to believe that the world is terrible and that everybody else is doing better than you. There is some experimental evidence for this too. In one study involving 2,743 people, researchers randomly asked some of the participants to deactivate Facebook for 4 weeks. The people who deactivated Facebook spent more time doing offline activities and reported a small improvement in their overall well-being. Interestingly, they also became slightly less informed about current news, so there was a trade-off. The improvement in well-being was not enormous, but that is almost the point. You do not need to disappear from the internet, delete every app, and live in the woods. You may simply need to become more deliberate about what receives your attention. Being informed is useful. Reading 20 different versions of the same negative story normally isn't. Following someone because they educate or inspire you can be useful. Following them purely so that you can compare their best moments with your normal life is probably not. You cannot control everything that happens around you, but you have much more control over what repeatedly receives your attention. And whatever receives your attention will eventually influence how you see your own life. The third thing is to stop waiting to feel positive before taking action. People often assume that motivation comes first. You feel confident, so you go to the gym. You feel optimistic, so you apply for the job. You feel inspired, so you start working on the project. But it often works in the opposite direction. You take a small action. That action produces a little progress, and that progress gives you a reason to feel more positive. You do not need to fix your entire life in one day. Clean one part of the room. Go outside for 10 minutes. Send that email you've been avoiding. Finish one small task. Make one decent meal. None of those things will solve every problem, but they give you evidence that you are still capable of influencing what happens next. That feeling of control matters. Negativity grows when everything feels permanent and outside of your control. Even one small action can interrupt that feeling. The fourth thing is gratitude. And I know gratitude can sound like one of those slightly annoying pieces of advice that people give when they don't understand what your actual problems are. If someone is struggling financially, telling them to be grateful will not pay their bills. If someone has lost someone, writing down 3 positive things will not remove that grief. That is not what gratitude is supposed to do. Gratitude is not a replacement for solving problems. It's a way of stopping your problems from becoming the only thing that you can see. A meta-analysis combined 23 randomized studies involving more than 6,700 people. It found that expressing gratitude produced a modest improvement in psychological well-being. The word modest matters. Writing down 3 good things will not magically cure depression, remove anxiety, or fix a serious problem. It should not be treated as a replacement for professional support when somebody needs it, but it may help train your attention so that the problem is not the only thing that you notice. You can be worried about money and still appreciate a conversation with a friend. You can be disappointed with your progress and still recognize how far you have already come. You can have a difficult day without deciding that every part of your life is terrible. Both things can be true at the same time. A useful habit is to ask yourself one simple question at the end of the day. What went well today? It doesn't need to be anything impressive. Maybe you exercised, maybe you finished some work, maybe the weather was good, maybe someone made you laugh. You're not trying to prove that your life is perfect. You are training yourself to notice the parts your brain might otherwise ignore. The fifth thing is to pay attention to how you speak about yourself. People sometimes say things about themselves that they would never say to another person. Things like, I'm useless, I always ruin everything, I'm never going to be successful. Because those sentences are only thoughts, they feel like they are harmless. But if you repeat something often enough, you can start treating it like it's a fact. Try describing the behaviour rather than attacking the person. So instead of saying I'm lazy, say I have not been consistent recently. Instead of saying I'm terrible with money, say I need a better system for managing my money. Instead of saying I always fail, say this attempt did not work. That is not empty positive thinking, it's simply more accurate language. A behaviour can change, a system can improve, another attempt can be different. Once you turn a temporary problem into a permanent identity, changing it becomes much harder. It's also important to accept that you will not feel positive every day. Some days will be frustrating. Sometimes you will feel tired, worried, or angry for a completely understandable reason. You do not need to judge yourself for that as well. The aim is not to eliminate every negative emotion. Negative emotions can be useful. They can show you that something needs to change. The problem begins when a temporary emotion is allowed to make permanent decisions. Having a terrible day does not mean you need to quit your job, end a relationship, abandon your goals, or decide that your future is hopeless. Sometimes the best thing you can do is acknowledge that today was a bad day, get some sleep, and reconsider everything tomorrow. Positivity is not believing that nothing bad will happen. Bad things will happen, plans will fail, people will always disappoint you, you will make mistakes. Positivity is believing that when those things happen, you will still have options. You can still learn something, you can still adjust the plan, you can ask for help, you can try again, or you can decide that something is no longer right for you and move in a different direction. You do not need to believe that everything happens for a reason. You only need to believe that one difficult event does not get to decide the rest of your life. So if you want to become more positive, do not begin by trying to convince yourself that everything is perfect. Start smaller, question the negative prediction, pay attention to what you consume, take one useful action, notice something that went well, and speak to yourself with the same fairness you would offer someone else. You will still have bad days, but a bad day becomes exactly that. One bad day, not proof that you have a bad life. And to me, That is what being genuinely positive actually means.